Hello, everyone, and welcome to Organizational Change Management and ITSM. We're calling this one Excalibur Insights. My name is Tabitha Ishman, and I'm the Marketing Manager of Excalibur Data Systems. And I just wanted to welcome all of you to the webinar today and talk about a few logistics before we go ahead and get started. So the webinar is being recorded and the lines are muted, and the recording will be sent via email to everyone on the line tomorrow. We'll answer questions at the end in a Q&A session, but you can ask questions at any time during the presentation just by typing them into the chat or question section. And then you can go ahead and hit the next slide. Just a little bit about Excalibur Data Systems is we are a leading edge consulting firm guiding organizations through their digital transformation journey. I know we have a lot of great information for all of you today, so I'm just going to let Mike Fuson, VP and Senior Solution Architect of Excalibur Data Systems, kick us off. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you, Tabitha. So as Tabitha said, I'm Mike Fuson from Excalibur Data Systems, and I have with me Rob Gauguin from Excalibur Data Systems. We are a couple of the senior architects here at Excalibur and work with customers and have some pretty deep experience in helping customers manage organizational change management as they go through their digital transformation journey as an organization. One of the key questions is, why is organizational change so hard? And there are these are a few of the many reasons that it's difficult, but these are the ones we see most often. And it's just because as humans, and by our nature, we tend to resist change. Change is a difficult thing for us to accept. No matter how flexible we may be, change can be a difficult thing to accept. When you're trying to change the organization, be that a tool or various technologies or even processes, there are a lot of moving parts to being able to make that organizational change effective. And one of the other key items is a lack of support for the effort needed for effective organizational change. I want to share with you a couple of statistics here that we found. So according to Gartner, organizational change success. So clear success rate, according to Gartner, 34% of the time. Clear failure, 50% of the time. And then 16% are somewhat mixed results. And this goes with kind of what we've seen, not in an anecdotal sense, but what we've seen actually out there in the wild, is that for a lot of our customers, this is an area that not enough attention in many cases is paid to. It's very important to pay attention to the organizational change and the impact that's going to have on the success of your project. Now, why does organizational change fail? Two very prime causes, and this kind of goes back to why it's so difficult. Insufficient communications and lack of leadership. Those are two of the primary drivers that cause an organizational change to fail. We're going to talk a little bit about what are the things that you can do and what are the parts and pieces of effective organizational change management. So it's not just an event. It's like organizational change is not a party that you throw or it's not a lunch meeting. It is an end-to-end process. So you're trying to understand the logic of all of the analysis that goes in. It's fed in to help people see what the change is all about, being able to address and deal with the emotions. That's that visceral sense that we have as humans. Oh my gosh, change is difficult. Change is going to be hard for me to accept. And then being able to manage the overall change behavior. And this is very circular because as you go through one type of organizational change, whether that be changing a process, and I think to things like customers that are going to mature their change management process. You may be making some changes in the tool, but those changes really are being driven by process changes. Maybe you're introducing a new layer of approvals or whatever it may be. It could be something fairly small, could be something fairly significant. you've got a lot that you've got to go through because it's different than what we've done before. And that's going to create some of the angst. So getting to kind of the meat of this, and Rob and I are going to have some fun talking about some of the things we've seen out there. But what are the steps for successful organizational change management? And you'll see here, there's 7 key steps as we see it, and as kind of the organizational change industry sees it. There actually is a certification to be an organizational change manager. It is a role, and we have, and Rob will talk about one of our customers, that's actually a key role in every project that they have. There's a person that serves as the organizational change manager, not just the change manager like we're upgrading a server, but the organizational change manager managing all of these behaviors. So it's everything from finding a sponsor to onboarding some champions, identifying it, the what's in it for me to help get your teams on board, and how to work and unpack all the use cases for the new technology, the tool, or the process, and then communicating a clear message and highlighting what the benefits are, generating excitement, and then going through the training process so they know exactly what to do. The most effective organizational change that we see for a lot of our customers really is driven by communication. It should not, by the time you go live, if it's a surprise to somebody, we failed to manage the organizational change, even at the most basic level. So step 1 is finding that executive sponsor. So research shows that getting sponsorship from top C-level on down is the most important success factor in implementing a new technology, tool, or process. If you want to make the employees feel better about the change, have your CEO or CIO or somebody on the leadership team championing the initiative and actually using the new technology, tool, or process. Not just playing it lip service. This isn't them ramming it down people's throat and driving it from above, but this is them actually championing what is happening and why it's beneficial to the organization. And Rob, I know you've got some experience in kind of helping to get that sponsor support. What does something like that look like?
I think that the important part about gaining that sponsorship is to articulate the goals of the change to the sponsor and ensuring that the overall organizational goals or objectives that the C-level is trying to obtain, those changes directly support or tie into those overall organizational goals. And I think that when you're able to draw or connect the line between our business strategy with what we're trying to accomplish to support that business strategy, you're going to find that when you're able to make that connection, the C-level or the executive team are going to get behind that change. They're going to get behind the changes that you're making overall, whether that's a piece of technology, whether that's a process change, whether there's all kinds of types of change that fall within inside that organizational change management area. And that's really what it comes into, is connecting the dots between what you're trying to do to support those organizational objectives for the most part. And we find that you get a lot of success when you're able to connect the dots, because sometimes people at that level get disconnected between the technology and how it plays a role in those organizational objectives. And if you're able to make that connection, they'll be able to get behind that more.
Very interesting. And that kind of leads into using champions to deliver that message, generate the excitement, and help with use cases. Organizational change management champions can help the teams to get excited about the changes to what the changes to the organization will mean to them. I've kind of got an anecdote on this, working with one of our large hospital customers. This was going to be a huge shift. They were moving from HP Service Management, which they had been on for many, many years, to Cherwell Service Management. And in doing that, it was going to change a lot of, they were taking the opportunity and making that change to refine a lot of their processes. So not only were we changing the tool, we were changing the processes that they were using and that they were used to. So there was a lot of change, a lot of angst. Everybody was used to working a certain way. And we all hear this all the time, well, this is the way we've always done it. It's something that frustrates me sometimes because I don't usually believe that's a good reason to keep doing something a certain way just because we've always done it that way. Take a look at the overall things going on, but they knew that this was going to cause a lot of angst as a large organization. And they also knew, how are we going to help the individual groups come up to speed and have confidence in what was going on with the project. So what they required was that every functional team in the organization assign someone to be the product champion from that team. And there's a lot of folks that volunteered from teams. Somebody had to be chosen. And we would not only meet with those team members, and they were able to kind of, as we were beginning and developing different things and configuring things, they got that kind of early insight into what was going on. They were the first folks that were trained very intimately in the system. They understood what the processes were because they were able to sit with and listen to the process owners that were explaining the changes in the processes. They were able to give input. And I watched a lot of adjustments, minor tweaks, minor changes to things based on feedback from those team members who were representing their team and championing on the other side, their team's interest in this overall project being successful. What ended up happening was they went back and were able, and I got to sit through a few of the meetings because there were some larger teams that wanted to meet with the core team and ask some questions. And we really didn't say anything. The champion handled almost all the questions with a lot of excitement. Oh, you guys won't believe what we saw today. This is going to be so cool. You know how it's like a 5-step process now to do X? Well, now you click on like one button, answer 2 questions, and poof, everything's now taken care of. There's been a lot of thought put into this. And in addition, when we went to roll the overall system out, they had somebody who was what we would refer to in this particular case, who was a super user. So not everything came back to the core team as a question. The super user would work with the person that had the question. Sometimes it was that person missed or didn't pay attention to training. Not that that happens at any of your organizations, of those of you that have joined us today, but we've seen it on occasion here and there. And they were able to answer those questions. And so the volume that you normally get in a new go live, it was actually reasonably quiet because they headed off a lot of questions at the pass. And also, if there was a perceived issue, they were able to kind of help us better understand what that challenge really was. And it worked out fantastically. And they've kind of continued that as they've gone through process improvements and changes to the tool, bringing on additional teams. They've got a large cadre of champions there that help to support the overall continual improvement that they're trying to do as an organization. And then you start to look at the what's in it for me factors, right? All the team members, as mentioned, they need to understand the new technology, the new tool, or the process, and what it's going to do for them. And so when you take the time to show them how this is going to make their life easier, or how they're much more likely to embrace the technology, and in turn increase your return on investment. This all drives to communications. If you're communicating what's happening out there, it makes it much better and much easier to get the adoption. Rob, what are some of the challenges that you've seen as folks kind of struggle with that? What's in it for me?
I find that people sometimes don't understand, or misinformation can often lead to challenges on that front. I mean, people are internally motivated, especially if you're rolling out a new technology or a new process itself. What's in it for me in terms of how does my job fundamentally change? When I come to work every single day, how does my job change? And a poor communication plan and a poor rollout will lead to people not understanding, what am I supposed to do now? How does this change? oh, it was so simpler before. It may not have been simpler before. It may have been far more complicated and convoluted, but if you don't truly understand what it is that you're doing, then you run into it was so much easier to do it the way we used to do it. You could have the best technology and you could have the best processes, you have the best intent, but if you don't have that what's in it for me factor, if you don't have it where you get the buy-in of the people not only on the front line, right from the top down, right down to the front line, then you run into that resistance. And then a process and a piece of technology is only as effective as those who are actually going to follow the process or use the technology. So if you're able to show them the benefit, the return for them internally, you're going to then in turn generate a better transition, a more less resistance to change, and an excitement. And a lot of times, like in our projects, a recent one that we did, we had an OCM, and they worked alongside the project management team, and they generated excitement. I call it the wow factors, the what's in it for me wow factors. Oh, that is so much easier to do than the way we used to do it before. Oh, this solutions this pain point or solutions that pain point. So when you're positioning these things, if you know that your new process or technology is going to solution a number of pain points that people experience on a day-to-day activity, highlight those areas, drive that to your employees to say, this is what's in it for you. These are the things that it solves that you constantly struggle with day to day. And this is how we're going to make life better for you overall. And that gives them that internal motivator to want to jump on board with the change.
Yeah, and that leads us to the understanding how the employees currently work and unpacking those use cases for the new technology, the tool, or the process. So before you implement something new, understand how your employees are currently doing their jobs, determine what the pain points they may be experiencing. And this, along with the previous step, will help to ensure you're implementing something that's going to make them work smarter, not harder. So the what's in it for me also is them being able to give input into what you're about to do. You see how these things start to tie together, and so much of it is tied to effectively communicating what is going on, what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. And it lets them kind of get some of that, how do I want to put it, that initial angst that everyone has over something new, to be able to get over that, get past it, maybe get it out of their system earlier in the process rather than later. Now, Rob, you had talked about working with an OCM at one of our projects and how successful it was. We've talked about this internally quite extensively. Is that something that was part of their process and letting people kind of unpack that angst early on in the process?
Yeah, Mike. So part of their fabric as an organization, they employ OCMs, and any capital project that's being undertaken has an OCM assigned to it. So they work closely with the business, they work with the project manager, they work with the people, and they bridge the gap. I mean, IT change management's one thing, putting in, dropping in technology, making infrastructure change, that's the same old process that we're all used to in terms of an ITEL process. But one thing that it doesn't do is it doesn't factor in the human factor, the people factor. And in organizational change management focuses on that human factor. It focuses on that shift that you're going to do. So this particular customer uses OCMs. They're fully qualified, certified OCMs. And one of the trends that I've noticed that working with this customer is they like to pack it up like a journey. They like to say, we're all going to go on a journey together and we're all going to, grow in this journey. And they inspire that esprit de corps that is often missing from a cold email that just simply says, here it is, this is what's happening, see you later. And OCM will then turn around and work with how we're going to train the people. I have seen them have brown bag sessions to answer questions, or town halls to answer questions about the upcoming changes or processes or technology. I've seen them solicit feedback using surveys and stuff like that to try to get the pulse of the service culture within an organization. I have seen them, really be communicative off of every aspect of it and work closely with the project manager on that project to ensure that the communication plan lines up with the project milestones to make sure everybody feels informed and everyone knows what's going on. So instead of just saying, hey, management is doing this stuff to us and we just have to live with it, they actually feel like they're part of the journey. They're part of the process. And they understand the transformation that their organization is going through, whether that's from a technology perspective, a process perspective, et cetera, or a reorganization of mindset or a shift of some form. And OCMs really do a fantastic job of bridging that gap to take care of the human factor of any shift within inside of a business.
And that leads to what you were talking about, communicating a clear message, highlighting the business goals, and again, the benefits. You're implementing it, new technology, a tool or process, but make sure it's communicated in a clear and concise way, and make sure you're doing this well before the implementation, to your point, Rob, well before the implementation. And we have some examples here a little bit later on in the presentation where we talk about, and we're going to talk about some very successful things we've seen customers do in helping to communicate and get this message out to the customers that are out there that are going to be impacted by this change. With that, generating a little bit of excitement using internal marketing techniques, show people that the new tool or technology, show the new tool in action, create one-pagers, graphics that'll help employees understand the benefits, let people know what they can when they can expect the changes to happen. All the internal marketing techniques like those get everybody on the same page long before something new is rolled out and implemented.
You know, it's funny, Mike, about that one. It's funny about that one, Mike, just to give another example of that internal marketing technique. I have seen some customers use a mechanism of gamification to drive adoption and excitement about the platform. I actually saw one do sort of a treasure hunt to try to discover and force people, not force people, I shouldn't say force, but encourage people to go through and understand the new processes and technologies. And there's always, a benefit to that. When we implemented Cherwell Service Management at one customer, they implemented a thing where in the very first beginnings of it, they were encouraging people to use the platform to the point where they'd say the person who, closes the most this or gets a certain stat or hits a certain target, the best team that does this is going to win something or get something type thing. And that can drive utilization of the platform. They want to understand it because, hey, we want to be the #1 team. It's not about that gift card or anything like that. It becomes a point of pride and a point of gamification where you have internally, you're trying to drive that excitement around that. And I've seen this used multiple times on that internal marketing technique where there's a tangible reward, but there's also that personal pride in knowing that, hey, I'm on board with this. I'm going through this journey with the customer, and hey, look at what we're doing, and I'm going to demonstrate that I am the one leading the charge. And that's when you have your champions, but then you also have your cheerleaders, as I like to call them, where you have the champions, the go-to people that are driving as part of the project, but you also have your cheerleaders saying, "This is awesome! Oh my goodness!" And that incitement can be infectious with inside teams in an organization where, oh my, have you not seen this yet? Let me show you type thing. And then you have champions and you have cheerleaders, and those cheerleaders can drive a lot of that adoption as well.
And then that starts to drive to training, right? Making sure your employees know exactly what to do with technology or tool. Hosting trainings, lunch and learns, town hall meetings like you talked about, Rob, where you walk through the new tool and make sure people have proper training. Most larger implementations will work with the customer's training team, or will act as the training team to help deliver a more formal training setup. But then there are post-training things that can be done to really start to institute it. I'm going to talk about a couple of examples a little bit later that we saw at a particular customer that worked really, really well, that are kind of that in between the lunch and learn and the town hall. It was kind of a unique way to do it. But as you see, what was the common thread? Communication. Without effective communication, so many organizational changes is untenable. You'd have no way to release the angst, release that pressure, and no one feels like they had a voice in anything that was going on. So, looking at communication methods, right? How have we seen customers do this really, really well? One customer that I worked with, and they were willing to share some of what they've done with many of our other customers who have kind of done the same thing, are what we call a project newsletter. They work with their marketing and training teams, and they put out kind of a little weekly blurb. Hey, here's something new that's coming with our implementation, in this case, implementation of Cherwell. Here's something new that's coming. It was a little tidbit. And Rob, to your point, that started to drive some of those cheerleaders who were like, holy cow, we're finally going to fix that issue. We're finally going to have something to do X, whatever it may be. But it was kind of that drip marketing campaign where every week an email went out, kind of doing a little bit of a project update, and then also sharing a tidbit of something new that was coming. And it took a bit of work to kind of plan that whole process out, and working with the marketing team to know, okay, what are we releasing next within the newsletter. But when we went live, there was nobody. If you had no idea we were implementing a new IT service management system, then you had to have been living under a rock, or you've been completely disconnected from the organization for more than 6 months, because they've been talking about it before the project even started. They talked about it as the project was in flight, and it made everybody very aware as to what was going on. Now, they married that with a project preview, so kind of that lunch and learn town halls. They would host it was about once every 3 weeks. We kind of give anybody who was interested an update of some of the new things that were coming. We'd highlight things that were around what was in the newsletter and show a couple of things. It was just a little half-hour thing during lunchtime. We had a lot of folks join us. Some folks had questions, and there were questions, some we could answer, some we didn't have answers to, and we would make sure we got back to them with the answers. But it also gave us some interesting information and some interesting insight to help drive adoption, drive understanding within the organization. Posters, one of our international clients, I spent some time in their office in India for their go live, and what they had been doing with communications is they had, for example, their portal was something that was new for them as an organization. So they had made these big posters of the new self-service portal, and they were posted up around the office, and it garnered excitement. And when we came in and we took over one of the conference rooms for about 10 days for the go live, they were able to, they saw us and they'd ask us questions, and there was some excitement because they had been hearing about this. They saw the things that were going to be going on, and it generated a lot of excitement. An event activity that we've seen, and we've seen this at multiple clients now. With one of our customers, the self-service portal was a brand new thing. Their previous platform did not have a self-service portal, and they had done communications around what was happening internally, but they wanted to get the customers drawn in because they wanted to start to, as so many of us want to do, cut down the number of calls to the service desk, cut down emails that were coming in, and have folks leverage the self-service portal. So they did an event around the self-service portal. It was on 2 different days. We did a breakfast event, and they had used their one of their meeting spaces in the upper part of their building, and it was biscotti and coffee. And came in, and there were a number of televisions where we had hooked up some very, very simple slideshows that were showing stuff. The project team was there answering questions and talking to them about the different things that were coming. And they walked away, and I still have mine. It was a little coaster for your coffee that had the address for the self-service portal. Everybody walked away with a little gimme, so a nice little marketing swag sort of thing. And they garnered quite a bit of interest in it because folks were able to ask questions and start to understand what was this impact of this self-service portal going to be for them. And that's all driven by marketing. You start looking at newsletters and product previews, and you're getting the word out. You're marketing and selling to the organization these changes that are about to come. Now, Rob, I know you've seen some other things out there that folks have done.
It's important to note about this, though. This is the catch. Don't rely on one media or medium to deliver the message. Don't rely on, well, we're going to send a bazillion emails. People don't want that, right? It's good to stay communicated in email, but not everybody's going to see those emails. Not everybody's going to grab a hold of that, or they may feel overwhelmed. Multi-pronged approach when it comes to your communication is vital for organizational change management. Some of the things that you were saying about, your little gimmies. I was on a project one time. They had project polos, like a polo shirt, like a collared shirt, like a shirt with the project name and stuff on it, and they were giving those shirts out to the project teams and to the champions. And so getting close to that time where we had the big go live day, people were all wearing their project shirts so that people could recognize those people who were involved with the project. They're a go-to person to assist with any of that stuff. People were all given, like you said, little takeaways like mugs or whatever, all kinds of little things. It was an event. There were balloons. Put it this way, any event that has a balloons at it for any type of go live, I mean, everyone's going to pay attention to that, right? So it was a big thing. I mean, it was exciting. And clearly, this also depends on the size of your organization. It depends on your commitment to the change that's being undertaken. You're not always going to do this for every single change, but when you're talking about a transformational change, large changes like core functions, we're replacing an ITSM platform or ESM platform. That is a big deal, right? And so you have to balance that out in terms of how much of an impact is this going to have to my organization, and how much effort do we have to put into the OCM component. And a lot of that has to do with how many people are impacted by this and how significantly are they impacted. And that is your gauge of how much effort do we have to put into this. It has to be part of the costing of the project. It has to be factored in, and it is money well spent.
Well, and organizational change doesn't end when the project goes live, right? In order for it to be truly successful, you need to continue to push the organizational change along. And that was something I saw one of our customers, what they did that was really interesting. It was kind of a cross between a lunch and learn and an event. The service desk manager who managed the team that managed the platform would buy them lunch once a week. And it was, come talk to the Cherwell administrators. And so folks were able to just stop into the cafeteria, and they had a little little area cordoned off, and they had a little sign, and people would come over and sit down and nosh on their lunch and talk to them about, I wasn't able to figure this out, or this doesn't seem to be working for me, or could we do this? They got a lot of great ideas from the team of further improvement of the platform. They also got a pulse of how folks were adapting and adopting the new platform, but it made a very open forum without that team having to be pummeled by emails. They said, hey, if it's an urgent system issue, obviously, email in. But if it's a non-urgent thing, every other week you can stop in and talk. So a lot of people, if it was a non-urgent thing, save their question to be able to come sit with the administrators and have a chat. And it worked really well, and folks really enjoyed it because it was a chance to interact with the team that managed the system and work through those the various things within the system. And we're going to help drive new ideas. And there were a couple of ideas that came out of that, of things that folks brought up, and they went and pulled those folks in as new champions for helping them to improve their overall process. And they still do it to this day. It's been, gosh, 4 years, and they do it a couple times a month. They can, or folks just come over and say, hey, thanks for all the hard work you guys do, keeping it running, or taking our ideas and putting them into practice or whatever it may be. And they've come up with some actual big changes to the system. They've had other departments in the organization stop over and say, hey, so-and-so was showing me what you guys are doing on this front. Is that something we could do for our department? And it started the conversation. So it made it very open and very approachable, where it wasn't something kind of being done in a vacuum. And that communication was so key to the overall success that they had in implementing a new system with new processes. It was a big change for the organization. That organizational change and managing it continued long after the initial project had gone live. So it really becomes a build-up approach, right? It's gradual, increasing in knowledge and practical application, where you're engaging and introducing the communications, potentially process and role communication. I know when we build out training, a lot of times we will build training out specific to teams that are going to engage in change management, or teams that are involved in problem management or knowledge management, or we may cover things at a higher level for all of the teams because they may interact with those different process areas. But then there may be deeper dives for the teams that, for example, do management of the assets within the CMDB. There'll be a deeper dive into those items. And so, as you're going through and kind of building out your plan, what does that look like? What are the roles that we're going to have? Impact education, the preview sessions, trainings, and then letting them have some practice with the system before we're ready to go live. And then if you do the things and you kind of build it up, everybody's in the know, everybody's had a chance to give input, everybody's had a chance to interact, and they're now ready to embrace that future state. Is that something you've seen, Rob, where it's that gradual progression, and the organizational change starts to kind of take on its own life and have its own heartbeat as you go through the process?
I mean, organizational change has to be engaged in the project from day one. We say we're going to do a project, and this is what we're going to do. OCMs need to be at the table. They need to be part of that evolution. They need to be the ones that facilitate that communication. They need to be the ones that take the message to the people, if you will, so that everyone sort of understands what's happening. And it is a gradual approach, right? Because the further along a project happens, the more you understand what the outcome is eventually going to be. Because if you're in the project and you're building out processes and you're building out different things, when you're delivering information to your staff, your employees, you always have to make sure that you're delivering fairly solid information that is going to be close to final state. But you don't want to dump on them in the last minute. You don't want to say, hey, we're going live next week and here you go. It needs to be that gradual approach as it's sorted out through the project and that information is released through the project. But yes, it has been a step-up approach. And as the project evolves, so does the efforts in terms of organizational change that occur in order to make sure that the message is appropriately delivered to everyone and they have a firm understanding of what the change is, how it impacts them, and when that transition is taking place, and the outcomes of that. And to your point, Mike, organizational change post project activities include things like being involved in continual service improvement and other areas like that. And it does play a factor in there, 100%. I agree with you on that one.
And so support and engagement from leadership, just from a recap perspective, is support and engagement from leadership is a critical factor to success. Without their support and engagement, it's going to be very, very hard to drive the necessary organizational change to be successful. So some of those examples that we talked about at some of those special events, we always had our executive sponsors and members of our executive team that were helping to champion it there to show their support to what was going on, which kind of sets a tone for everybody. Hey, this is happening. This is real. You know, you've got the CIO pretty excited. So, you know, if I'm on the IT team, I want to make sure I make the top boss pretty happy with my level of engagement with this. And it becomes very, very, very critical that they're visible to the team. You know, they're on some of the meetings. Obviously, you know, they've got other things that they're involved with, so they can't be on every single meeting that's out there, every single a webinar you might host. But one of the things that I saw that the customer that did the newsletters, about once every 2 months within the project cycle, there was a note from leadership, something that they were excited about. And we kind of had built them into the overall the organizational change plan, and they would, you know, usually be helped to pen a little article on it, but it helped drive the point home that, you know, the executive team is paying attention to this. The executive team is engaged and is very driven to ensure that this overall project is a success. But communications is the make or break element to managing and making the organizational change successful. Tabitha, I'd like to open the floor to some questions. I believe we may have a couple I saw in there already.
Yeah, we did have a few come in. I have one on my side do you have any advice on how to prove to my managers that organizational change keeps us at a competitive advantage?
Rob, you want to start that one?
When you're performing a change, it's typically to become more cost effective, become more efficient in what you're doing, whether that's a process change, a technology change, and so on and so forth. If you're able to effectively transition into that new process, that new technology more efficiently, have a higher rate of adoption, then you're going to start to see the impacts and the results of that rationalized. That return on investment, that return coming back to your organization is going to be very quickly, much more quickly realized. You can start to measure the effects of that change, which is very important to determine how effective that change is to your organization. You can start to manage by those new metrics, and you can start to see the immediate impact to your organization. Any impact to your organization that's going to improve cost effectiveness, efficiency, whether it's on the technology front, a process front, et cetera, those are all going to drive that competitive advantage. And it allows you to, if you're effective at that organizational change, when it comes time to pivot your organization, like for example, we had, everybody got hit by COVID. And if you have effective organizational change processes in place, when you get hit by something that you have to pivot the direction of your organization, pivot the mechanisms that used to drive your organizations to something completely different, and you have effective organizational change management, you have the ability to make those shifts quickly, you're going to be more agile in your ability as a business, and you're going to be able to make those pivots and those shifts more effectively compared to, say, your competitor who may not be able to make those shifts rapidly who struggle with organizational change, who struggle with resistance that they can encounter from their own internal business when it comes to trying to rapidly pivot their organization and business.
One of the things when I get hit with that question, one of the things that I will ask is, would you undertake a significant project without having a project manager? And 100% of the time the answer is no. We need a project manager to be able to manage all of the details of the project, make sure things are kept on track. Our project managers here at Excalibur, project managers that I've known over the years, call it herding cats, right? They're trying to make sure all the different pieces that need to occur are all happening, and they're happening in the correct order and in sync, so the project doesn't fall behind schedule. And the same thing holds true for organizational change management. If you are embarking on a large project, why would you not have an organizational change manager who, like a project manager, is there from the project's initial inception, and is there to help make that plan of how to communicate what is going on with the overall project, to do all of the things to manage that organizational change. Now, your project manager may have key items in there in collaboration with the organizational change manager, but the organizational change manager is helping to drive that other piece that makes the project successful. And so if you wouldn't run a project without a project manager, you certainly don't want to run a project without an organizational change manager. And they're generally not the same person, because a project manager usually already has enough to do, and they're usually not just managing a single project within an organization. And your organizational change manager, and ones that we've worked with, they're not just working on a single project. They've got multiple projects that they're also working on, but they're doing their part to help drive that project to success.
I do want to add one thing, Mike. I think that it's really important for people to realize. Organizational change management does not have to be considered another layer of red tape on a project, right? There's a lot of people that get involved in projects and say, oh, the PMs and different components that make up a project become red tape, right? Where it's like, oh, we got to jump through these hoops in order to get, where we got to go. And it becomes more bureaucratic than anything. Organizational change management is not that. It doesn't have to be that. And I think I like to dispel the myth that OCMs and organizational change management, similar to project management, is vital to see the key successful outcomes of your project and to make sure that that project transitions smoothly into your organization's ecosystem, and to ensure that people adopt it and move forward with it where employees feel comfortable with it. Because anybody can take a piece of technology and throw it down someone's throat, okay? The problem with that is making sure that when you do deploy technology, that people adopt it and they digest it better than saying, here's a new piece of technology, use it, right? And you're going to have a happier employee experience. And if your employees are dissatisfied with your organization, your service culture, you're going to run into things like trouble retaining employees. You're going to run into problems with a bad reputation amongst the opportunities of bringing a new staff on. I mean, if you have a good organizational change management workflow, that whenever you're releasing things, employees are on board with that, and they're buying in, and they feel self-motivated, and they have internal motivators, and they understand it, you're going to have happier employees. And the happier your employees are with all these types of things that happen, the better off an organization is as a whole, the more effective an organization is as a whole, if everyone likes what they do and they like their job.
Excellent. Tabitha, are there additional questions?
Yeah, so I think we did already talk about how individuals would benefit from a consultant, so I'm going to skip over that one. But I think what buzzword should I implement was a question that came in. And I think I might know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you guys take it.
What buzzwords should I implement? Not quite sure I understand the question.
I think what things are what are the things that you say to inspire people's peak or interest, right? So like how when you're delivering information, and I am not a marketing person, but you know, that's what Tabitha is probably your best to answer this one. But how do you draw attention to those things, right? And what's the buzz? And I think of one change that an organization made. They were putting banners, almost like ads, in their SharePoint site. They were putting things all over the place like that. And it's to draw attention to it. It's to draw curiosity to it. It's to draw, you know, it's to draw that interest for people, making people want to, you know, participate, understand, you know, jump in and be like, what is that about anyway, right? You know, you could say things like, you know, do you share well? Question mark, right? And it'd be like, what are they talking about? Cherwell? What's this Cherwell? Blah blah blah, and it causes people, what are they talking about, right? And it causes people to then need to engage, right? You know, I share well. Do you? You know, and it's like you're playing off of that, you know, double entendre sort of feel about the play on words there. But that goes back to good marketing, and whether it's internal marketing, you know, external marketing, that plays a factor. Make it fun, be approachable, be communicative, and always send the positive message. And that's the important thing. Any change that you are implementing, because let's face it, guys, not every change you're going to make is going to be a popular one, especially if you're forced into it. But organizational change management can help people understand the reason you need to make an unpopular change and understand why you need to make that unpopular change, and ultimately drive buy-in, even though it might be a change the organization doesn't necessarily want to make at times, but they have to make for whatever reason. It could be a business strategy reason, it could be financials, it could be anything, right? And so organizational change management can play a big role in the pushback that you potentially could get for an unpopular change in your organization, not just all the happy changes, like we're bringing in new technology and things are going to be better and faster and awesome and automated. Sometimes organizations need to make changes that are not a popular change due to, like recently, COVID, for example. We're going to have to furlough a group of our employees. We're going to have to shut a department down for a period of time and different things like that. And as a result, we need to make changes to the way that we're doing business. And organizational change management can be a key role in trying to make sure that you keep your employees' morale up despite difficult times, to try to keep people on board and try to come together as an organization, right? So it's not just the good changes. It can also be the difficult changes that organizations need to deliver, that organizational change management can be key to ensuring there's something left there from a morale perspective and so on and so forth. And a lot of organizations had to suffer through this recently with COVID, and they're still dealing with this today.
So I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the last question, and then I'll have Mike kind of close out our webinar for today. But do you have some strategies to get commitment to our new plans of organizational change from my organization? Was a question that also came in. So strategies to get commitment.
I think that goes back to kind of the strategy we've highlighted, which is you need that executive sponsor. Everything is kind of driven from that executive sponsorship, and really having that individual, that stakeholder, that champion help to drive it. It's one thing for me as a consultant to recommend a change to a customer. We've got to have buy-in from the organization, and we can have buy-in from a certain team, but if their director or the CIO isn't supportive of that, it's very difficult to effectively change the organization. So, in those very, very early stages is identifying and getting on board that executive sponsor that'll really help kickstart, jumpstart the ability to drive the organizational change, and to have that person be integral to the overall process of some of the areas where we've highlighted, where they're visible or they're communicative to the overall community that's being impacted by the change, and helping to show their support and drive it. They don't have to, for example, let's take a real specific use case. We want to reinvent and take our change management, not organizational change management, but our core IT change management process up a couple of notches. We want to make it more feature rich. We want to make it more process driven. Maybe it's a little bit loosey goosey right now, and we want to kind of rein that in. Well, your executive sponsor doesn't have to know every bit and byte of what's going to happen with that, but they've got to be able to back what the team that's driving this is going to do as to the benefit to the organization. And that may be them sharing their concerns, where we've had a number of changes that have gone sideways that have impacted us. It could be any sort of story that they want to put around it, but they show their support of the efforts of the team to drive that change to the process, and that's going to help the rest of the team understand okay, this is happening. It's not a optional thing that I can opt out of. Okay, I'm not going to participate in the higher level change management because I don't want to. It's being driven that this is going to be something the organization is going to do. It helps people get over that initial angst of, do I have to get on board? Do I not have to get on board? Yep, you got to kind of get on board because it's going to happen. So now you can start sharing whatever it may be, your angst, your concerns, whatever is going to happen, to help then manage the organizational change. But I think it starts, and one of the most important factors is identifying and getting on board that executive sponsor.
I have a real quick example of that, Mike. I know that we're nearing the end of our time, but I have a really perfect example of this with a customer. There's a law firm who still does everything using physical checks. And the staff, specifically the ones that have to produce these checks, don't want to do it. They're like, why haven't we moved forward in technology? Why aren't we using electronic funds transfers? Why does everything have to be printed checks every month, every week, et cetera, et cetera? And this is a case of you have a managing partners and that are older in this law firm, and they don't want, no, this is the way we do it. This is the way I like it, kind of thing, right? And here's an example of the larger sum of the people that work in the organization want to change, but you don't have buy-in from the upper people who run the organization or that C-level. You're not getting the change through, right? Now, coincidentally, in that situation, it was, let's make an adequate use case. Let's actually give business justification for this, like dollars and cents. They demonstrated effectively the cost of moving to electronic funds versus what it was currently costing them in time, people, materials to continue to do it the way that they were doing it today. And the cost was staggering. And the managing lawyer said, I had no idea it was like the cost was this significant. And they were able to make that cut over to electronic funds after this law firm just straightly refusing to do this. And this happened just last year. And to think that a company in 2019 doesn't deal with electronic money and only in checks and only in that kind of stuff, it's kind of awe-shocking, but you are talking about a different generation of business. But even then, dollars and cents matter. So if you're trying to inspire change within your organization and you're looking to get that sponsorship buy-in, you've got to speak at a level that, again, draws back to the company's objectives and goals. How does it tie into it? And then every company is always going to have become more cost effective as one. So if you're able to draw it back into money, then great. And you're able to make an adequate business case that says, this is why we need to make this change. A clear business case. In this case, that the example I gave you was one. They're able to see the importance of that change. And then you're able to get that business sponsorship buy-in. And once you get that business buy-in, that executive buy-in, then you know what? That's half the battle. And then the rest of it, once they're in on board with it, it becomes, then it has momentum at that point. And then you're going to win. As long as you are persistent, you communicate, you're going to win.
Well, thank you, Rob. I want to thank Rob Gauguin for joining me today and sharing this presentation with you, and thank all of you for joining us. Keep watching our presentation channel. We have many more presentations coming up on various topics, from request management isn't just for IT anymore, growing ITSM capabilities with using technology alliance technologies, INO maturity, and even a series on KCS. We hope to see you again soon here with us at Excalibur. Thank you all for joining.